his novelty is the design of the trireme warships. And so whereas the older style, the Pentaconter, had only 25 oars per side, the trireme had upward of 30, and it was lighter and more maneuverable, among other things. And so this is a major innovation for the navies. And with regard to the piracy and the importance of bringing in revenues from colonies, command of the sea is everything. And what that means is the rise of the artisan or the craftsman is everything. But just finishing off that paragraph, Thucydides adds that later on, the Ionians too became a great naval power at the time of the first Persian king Cyrus and his son Cambyses. They, in other words, the Ionians, went to war with Cyrus and for some time gained control of the seas in their own area. Polycrates, or Polycrates, depending on however you want to pronounce it, who was tyrant at Samos at the time of Cambyses, he too was able through his sea power to make various islands subject to him, among them Rhenea, which he captured and consecrated to the Delian Apollo, and lastly the Phocaeans, when they were colonizing Massalia, defeated the Carthaginians in a sea battle. And so that's the entirety of paragraph 13, and Thucydides is going to shed some light on the way that paragraph ended immediately in paragraph 14. He says the following: "These were the most powerful fleets, but apparently even these, operating many generations after the Trojan War, had few triremes and were instead equipped with pentaconters and long ships, just like the earlier fleets. It was only slightly before the Persian Wars and the death of Darius, king of Persia after Cambyses, that triremes were available in any numbers to the tyrants in Sicily and to the Corcyraeans, and these were the last significant navies to be established in Greece before the invasion of Xerxes. The Aeginetans and Athenians, and a few others, had only acquired quite small fleets, and these consisted mostly of pentaconters. It was not until the last moment that Themistocles persuaded the Athenians, when they were at war with the Aeginetans, and when the Persian invasion was imminently expected, to build the ships with which they actually fought their sea battle against them, and even these were not completely decked over." Okay, and so what we see is that the rise of the craftsman, the rise of the artisan, and in particular, Amynocles, with his new art, the construction of ships for the navies, was a long and slow process. And most importantly, it wasn't until Themistocles was able to persuade the Athenians at the very last minute that they needed the triremes that the Athenians did in fact adopt this new art. And so what we're seeing right here is that it wasn't the Trojan War that led to the greatness that is Greekness, but rather it was the Persian Wars, because only with the Persian Wars and the persuasion of Themistocles that Athens adopted and embraced the new techne of Amynocles for the construction of their ships and the fortification and strengthening of their own navy. Now for us today, looking back and reading this, at this particular point, it would be a good time for us to pull out Plutarch and read his life of Themistocles. But I'm going to hold off on that for the moment because a few more comments are in order for us to be able to truly understand just how much Plutarch's life of Themistocles can help us at this point. And so just continuing into paragraph 15, Thucydides says the following: "These then were the navies of the Greeks, including both the older and the later ones. Those who actively developed them, however, strengthened their positions greatly in terms of revenue and dominion over others, especially those of them who had insufficient land of their own and who sailed against the islands and subjected these. But on land, not a single war took place from which any new power accrued. All those that did occur were individual disputes between neighbors, and the Greeks did not undertake distant expeditions abroad for foreign conquests, for they had not yet been brought together as subjects of the great powers, nor did they of their own accord make expeditions in common as equal partners, but each fought their individual wars against neighbors. The main exception was the war of long ago between Chalcis and Eretria, when the rest of Greece divided itself into alliances with one side or the other." Okay, so a few really important things happening there. Again, we see how absolutely critical the power of naval strength is for bringing in revenues, whether by commerce or through colonies and empire. And to repeat, from the previous paragraph, this did not occur as a result of the Trojan War, which is to say it did not occur as a result of the greatness, according to Homer, of the Greeks. Instead, what Thucydides is emphasizing here is that the greatness of Greekness, and in particular of Athenian Greekness, comes about as a result of Themistocles emphasizing how crucial it is to employ the techne, or the technology, of Amenocles in the fortification and strengthening of their navy. And also notice what Thucydides says there about no land wars leading to any kind of power, because what's happening is that the wars for real power are occurring on the sea. And so technological innovation regarding the Navy is so important that it greatly overshadows dominance by land. And one particularly interesting way to think of this is that Greece has arrived at a situation we recognize today in America that gets described as a loss of the frontier, which is to say, manifest destiny has been reached. And so going forward, presumably all great wars are going to be against great peoples outside of Greece, like the Persians, for instance.